Hi friends, Father Kerry Walters here, pastor of Holy Spirit American National Catholic Church, and this is another Holy Spirit moment, this one on a kind of restlessness that can lead us to God. Back in the 5th century, when he sat down to write his Confessions, St. Augustine opened with the claim that all human beings are by nature restless. You and I don't need St. Augustine to tell us that, do we? Each and every day of our lives, we have experienced the constant restlessness, the tension, the push me, pull you, between, on the one hand, our desire to be righteous, and on the other hand, our temptation towards vice. On the one hand, our deep, deep longing for virtue, and on the other hand, the seductive attractiveness of unrighteousness. This constant tension within us, this restlessness within us, is something that we live with, isn't it? The 17th century British divines came up with a very appropriate phrase to describe the restlessness. They called it the civil war within. And one of them wrote this: "Oh, to vex me, contraries meet in one. Inconstancy unnaturally hath begot a constant habit, that when I would not, I change in vows and in devotion." The person who wrote that particular bit of verse was John Donne, the metaphysical poet and the Anglican priest. It is the culmination of a series of 19 sonnets which have come to be called the Holy Sonnets. They were written probably between 1610 and 1620, but they weren't published until 1633, 2 years after Donne died. And my guess is that he decided not to publish them during his lifetime because they are so intensely personal, so intensely revelatory of his own religious troubles. They reflect his deep, deep fear of death, his deep sense of inadequacy before God, a sense of unworthiness that led him to worry not just about physical death, but about spiritual death. They reveal his struggles to find God deep within his own, what he considered to be unworthy self. They seem to have been born by exactly the kind of restlessness that St. Augustine talked about, that the 17th century divines who were Donne's contemporaries referred to as the civil war within. And yet, despite their bleakness, there are glimmers of redemptive hope within them. Because throughout the 19 sonnets, what Donne seems to offer is the conviction that despite the restlessness, there is not only an ultimate cure for it, but even more importantly, the restlessness can lead us to that cure. It can be what Donne calls in one of his sonnets a holy discontent. The sonnet in which Donne most emphatically speaks about holy discontent, a restlessness that can lead us to God instead of constantly pushing us back and forth between our better and our worse natures, is Sonnet 14. Sonnet 14 is quite famous, and you almost certainly have run across it sometime in the past. In that particular sonnet, what Donne does in a really remarkable kind of way is to combine two kinds of images, a martial, warlike image on the one hand and an erotic image on the other, in order to get across his point that the restlessness which otherwise could destroy us can lead us to God. And the reason it can do that is because it will lead us finally to surrender ourselves to God, instead of our thinking that we can somehow discipline our temptation toward unrighteousness and vice. We simply throw over the effort and put ourselves in the hands of God. We surrender to God. And this particular sonnet then is a request on Donne's part, again using these two kinds of images, for God to conquer his soul. It's not a request for mercy or compassion. It's a request for dominion. Let me read just a bit of the sonnet to give you a flavor of what Donne has up his sleeve. He begins with martial language. "Batter my heart, three-person God. For you as yet but knock, breathe, shine, and seek to mend. That I may rise and stand, o'erthrow me, and bend your force to break, blow, burn, and make me new. Donne, of course, is here suggesting that God has been too tender with him, that his willful lust for unrighteousness is too strong to be gently massaged by God, that the only way in which Donne can escape the back and forth restlessness which is torturing him is for God to declare all-out warfare on his temptation towards righteousness. And so that's why he uses this martial language at the very beginning of the sonnet. And he'll go on, as a matter of fact, to compare his soul to a town that has been usurped by the evil one, by Satan, a town that properly belongs to God. And seated within that town is the viceroy of God, his Donne's reason, which I believe by that he means his conscience. And yet the conscience, because it is captive in a usurped town, has no power over the usurper, has no power over vice or Satan. And therefore God has to besiege the town, to assail its walls, to break down all of the battlements, and to retrieve the town. The soul, in other words, needs to surrender to God. Now that's a remarkable image. But then Donne concludes the sonnet with an image that is just as remarkable and seems to be absolutely opposite to the martial imagery he's used before. Listen to what he says. Dearly I love you, and would be loved fain, but am betrothed unto your enemies. Divorce me, untie me, or break that knot again. Take me to you, imprison me, for I, except you enthrall me, never shall be free, nor ever chaste, except you ravish me. This bit of the sonnet reminds me of the Old Testament Song of Songs, in which the soul, the lover, cries to be taken by God the beloved. In this particular bit of the sonnet, what Donne is suggesting is that God's love needs to so overpower all of his wayward emotions and his undisciplined passions, needs to so overpower everything that holds him in this constant back and forth tension that it ceases and that the love of God takes its place. Once again, there's the notion of surrender. The first surrender was couched in warlike martial terms. This surrender is couched in terms of love overpowering everything that is contrary to love, of the soul being ravished, swooning with delight in entering into a union with the Godhead. Holy discontent. Holy discontent can be a restlessness that leads us to the surrender, which in turn opens ourselves up to the healing presence of God. The presence of God which will ease the restlessness that we're suffering from. But a restlessness, paradoxically, that can lead us to the point of surrender where God can step in. A younger contemporary of John Donne was the metaphysical poet and Anglican priest himself, George Herbert. And one of his most magnificent poems, one entitled The Pulley, he also speaks of what Donne calls holy discontent or holy restlessness. In this poem, what Herbert imagines is God pouring from a vase all kinds of blessings into humanity. And those blessings include beauty and wisdom and honor and pleasure. But God refrains from pouring the final gift into humans. And that gift, which lies at the bottom of the container, is rest. Rest. Why? Why does God withhold that gift? This is what Herbert says. He's imagining God speaking now. Yet let humans keep the rest, but keep them with repining restlessness. Let them be rich and weary, till at least, if goodness lead them not, yet weariness may toss them to my breast. Holy discontent can lead us to a state of weariness, to a state of soul emptiness, to a state of radical receptivity, where God can step in and ease that which we suffer from. Friends, I'm Father Kerry Walters, and this has been another Holy Spirit moment. Thank you so much. If you are of a mind, I invite you to subscribe. I'll see you again soon. God bless.